Everyone, welcome to today's class. So excited here to announce that I'm teaching my first C1 class of the year. So excited to do that. And we're going to start this first C1 lesson. This is not a class for intermediate students. This is a class not even for advanced intermediates. This is C1. So today in this advanced class, we're going to talk about advanced adverbial conjunctions. When we talk about transitioning our idea. So when you want to explain different things, when you want to contrast ideas, when you want to add more of the same idea, when you want to explain results or consequences, then you need to use the proper language so you can transition in your ideas and allow your ideas to flow in order in a transition, which makes sense, right? So today we're going to explore adverbial conjunctions. So what I got on the board are some basic, of course, they're not all of them, but let's say the most common adverbial conjunctions. The goal of this class, or the objective of this class, is for you to grasp the concept of what are adverbial conjunctions. So I got some circles here, some graphs here that'll help you understand it better. So the idea here is for you to grasp the use. And once you understand the uses, I'll also go ahead and explain some other advanced applications. And in our other lessons, we'll talk about the punctuation rules that we need to use if we are going to use emails, right? And use these conjunctions in emails, all right? So let's begin with the basics. We're going to begin with the basic conjunctions that we are all familiar with, right? We're all familiar with the with but and so. These are called coordinating conjunctions. They coordinate our ideas. Actually, the coordinating conjunctions stem from the term fanboys, right? So we use the phrase fanboys to remember the coordinating conjunction. So the F stands for, the A stands for and, the N stands for nor, the B stands for but, the O stands for or, the Y stands for yet, and the S stands for so. So these are the what we call the coordinating conjunctions, right? The basic conjunctions, because their job is to coordinate our ideas, and they're conjunctions because they connect or the flow of two separate ideas or more. So they are like this is like the origin, like the stem. This is like the base. If we understand the coordinating conjunctions, then understanding adverbial conjunctions is going to be much easier. So we start with let's say level one, right? Level one, intermediate, the lower intermediate. We start to use these. We have to use these conjunctions a lot. But now let's move on to, let's say, more advanced language. We're going to express the same ideas, but we're going to do it through an adverbial conjunction, which could look like a phrase or a compound word structure. So let's start with the basics. Let's start with the basic idea. I'm going to talk about the three most important. I mean, they're all important, but I'd like to always teach the most important ones. The first, let's start with the first concept of but. So we have but and so. So when we use but, everybody has used but. The idea of but, the conjunction is you are contrasting, right? We use but to contrast. That means we compare the differences of two ideas, right? So we use but to contrast ideas. We use and to add more of the same, right? We use and to always add more of the same. So we have an idea and we want to expand this one, this first idea, this initial idea, by adding more of the same information. And so is used to explain a result or to talk about a consequence of an action, or the result of one idea or the consequence of another idea over another, right? So we use so in that manner. So I want you to grasp the concept, right? So we use but to contrast, right? To compare, contrast, compare, right? We use and to add more of the same or similar ideas together. And we use so to explain the result or the consequence. Okay, great. So we got that part. Now that we understand that, we understand where these adverbial conjunctions come from. They stem, they originate from the coordinating conjunction. So now we have adverbial conjunctions. So remember, first level, coordinating conjunctions. Next level is the adverbial conjunction. So here we have some examples of adverbial conjunctions. Let's start with contrast. For contrast or to compare, you can use however, in contrast, nevertheless, and nonetheless. Yes, they look like they are bigger words, right? They are bigger words, but their essence is contrast or compare. That's it. Now let's go to these adverbial conjunctions. We have furthermore, moreover, in addition, and additionally. They're the same. They all just add more information. So they stem, their root is simply and. It's just a bigger word, you might want to say. And now to explain the result or consequence, we have as a result, that's why, or as a consequence, or consequently, other similar versions of it. So no biggie, because they stem from so, which is just to explain a result or a consequence. So it's just a more, let's say, elaborate way of saying so. This is just a more elaborate way of saying and. Same thing here. It's just a more elaborate way of saying but they're the same. Now, this comes useful when you're in a context where you need to be very formal, or perhaps you need to use language that's a bit more formal. You want to get your ideas across in a more, let's say, in a stronger way, right? More direct way. Then we use this type of language. We use adverbial conjunction. So now you understand where they come from. Now let's see how it works when it comes to transitioning from one idea to another. So let's start with contrast. We're going to start with however. So remember that however is used in contrast or to compare. And remember that however just simply means what? It means but. That's what it means, but. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this idea, contrast it to the second idea. Okay? So we could say, like we were reading a moment ago, we could start with the initial idea. We could say, in some countries, customer service is still in its infancy. However, but in the United States, customer service is considered of a high standard. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm comparing this idea. I'm putting it like this. I'm comparing this idea with this idea. Right? I'm comparing them. I'm contrasting them. Okay. And I'm using however, because the context of the conversation is more formal, like we were reading an essay, right? So it's very formal. We were saying, so we were talking about a customer service in America. So we said, in some countries, customer service is in its infancy. However, in the United States, it's considered of a high standard. So we're making that contrast. It would sound different with but. If I say but, it would sound different. The same idea is expressed. Just listen to it. In some countries, customer service is in its infancy, but in the United States, it's considered of a high standard. It's the same idea, right? But this however is just more, it's just stronger, right? It just conveys more than just a simple but. Okay. Now let's try other adverbial conjunctions. So we could say customer service in some countries is in its infancy. In contrast, in the United States, it's of a high standard. Or nevertheless, in the United States, it's of a high standard. Or nonetheless, it's of a high standard. So you see how it keeps on going, right? It keeps on elevating, right? There's a bunch of contrast. It's very serious, right? The comparison is very serious, when we use the adverbial conjunctions rather than just a but. Let's move on now to adding more of the same. So I'm adding, right, more info, more of the same information. So let's take furthermore as an example. Remember that furthermore, it stems from the conjunction and. This is where it stems from. So we're starting with one idea, right? And what we want to do is add more of the same idea or something similar that's in the same line, I would say. So I want to add more of this idea number one. So I add a supporting idea to add more, to add more of the same. So we could say transitioning from the United States of a high standard. So we could say, in the United States, customer service is considered of a high standard. Furthermore, companies in the United States actively participate in surveys, in answering surveys. So what I'm saying is, and. So I'm just saying, customer service, let's try and. Customer service in the United States is of a high standard. And companies actively participate in answering surveys. So I'm just adding more, I'm supporting more of the same idea, the same concept. I'm adding more to it. But when I said furthermore, it just sounds more interesting, more formal than just a simple and, right? Let's try other adverbial conjunctions, like moreover and in addition. Let's try moreover. So customer service in the United States is considered of a high standard. Moreover, companies actively participate in answering surveys. So you see that moreover, it just gives it that extra push there, right? That emphasis in adding that idea there. And in an email, in an essay, when you're writing, it needs to be there. It's part of the formality there, right? But it just sounds weak. It sounds too weak to introduce this idea to this one, right? So that's why we need a bigger word. Let's move on now to as a result or a consequence, right? As a result or a consequence. Let's use the phrase as a result. Let's start here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take idea number one. We'll say as a result, idea number two. So the result of the consequence is this, idea number two. This is the result or the consequence, okay? So let's continue with the previous idea. So we're going to say, okay, so since companies in the United States actively participate in answering surveys, right? We're going to start there. So companies actively participate in answering surveys. As a result, the information gathered by the surveys allows companies to improve their customer experience, right? So I'm explaining the consequence or the result of companies participating. What is the result? Better customer service, right? What is the consequence? Better interactions with customers. That's what I'm talking about. Now, remember, I forgot to say that as a result stems from saying so. I could use so, but it sounds different. Check it out. So American companies actively participate in answering surveys. So businesses can improve their interactions with customers. It doesn't really have the same punch to it, right? Let's try now an adverbial conjunction as a consequence or consequently. I'll say it again. So American companies actively participate in answering surveys. As a consequence, companies have been able to improve their customer satisfaction levels. It just sounds different. It just gives it that extra punch to it. It's a heavier word, heavier phrasing that you actually feel the result now. You understand it much better than just simply a so, right? So there you go. Okay, so there you go, guys. So the idea or the flow will help you. The adverbial conjunction will help you contrast your ideas, compare them, add more information to your original statement or idea, or emphasize the result or consequence of your initial idea. And this will allow you to express yourself in an advanced manner so you can, write emails that are more advanced, more sophisticated, get your ideas across much better. I want to add something additional. I'll add something additional as an extra in a moment about the differences between nevertheless and nonetheless. I want to share that with you and how I used it to turn around a situation in an email account, in a back office account that was struggling with customer service. I mean, they were struggling in their email communications, and practically I had to go in and correct all their writing styles. And the way that they explained resolution to customers in the emails was not proper. So practically we had to go in there and clean up the whole account, the whole back office account, and bring them up to par, right? Bring them up to the level that the client requested. And I'll tell you a story how we used adverbial conjunctions and correct punctuation to practically elevate our service level and the whole floor improving their metrics. It's a great, it's a real life application of how language impacts business, and in this case impacted this account, which allowed everybody to improve their metrics, which allowed the account to grow and to, for people to keep their jobs practically. So I want to share that one in the next opportunity, right? So thank you guys.